Boissonnault, est-ce que la situation économique, une récession et la montée des taux d'intérêt pourraient compromettre les promesses du gouvernement?
Je pense que ce qu'on était très clair dans l'énoncé économique de l'automne, c'est qu'on vise à avoir une année 23 turbulente en ce qui concerne l'économie, mais notre tâche, c'est de combler nos promesses qu'on a faites aux Canadiens, tout en regardant qu'est-ce qui va arriver avec l'inflation. Mais pour nous, les priorités du gouvernement, c'est exactement ce que nous sommes en train de discuter pendant cette retraite. Et pour nous, c'est très clair de continuer avec les promesses et aussi avoir un budget qui est responsable pour continuer avec la prudence fiscale.
Si l'économie se détériore et les taux d'intérêt continuent de monter, vous vous dites quand même, vous allez tous respecter vos promesses, les milliards pour la santé, les milliards pour les soins dentaires, etc.
Mais il va falloir faire des priorités, mais c'est très clair qu'on a des priorités, des préoccupations auprès des Canadiens et c'est notre tâche de répondre à ces préoccupations tout en respectant le cadre fiscal.
À quel point ça se répercute dans les sondages, à votre avis? Parce qu'on voit les conservateurs qui sont en avance. Est-ce que c'est une question de contexte économique, à votre avis, ou c'est autre chose?
Vous savez très bien que moi, je regarde les sondages qui sont les élections et la journée après les élections. Je ne m'en occupe pas des sondages pendant un mandat. Pour moi, ce qui est important, c'est le travail qu'on fait sur le terrain, le porte-à-porte que je fais et le fait qu'on est en train de livrer la marchandise pour les Canadiens.
That report yesterday from the Business Council of Canada and Bennett Jones basically saying that the outlook is much more pessimistic and you guys face a big hole in your ability to deliver on some of those priorities while keeping on a sustainable fiscal track. What do you make of that?
I respect the Business Council's perspective, and every regular period, we ask all the private sector economists to give us a sense of where the economy is heading. We have another one of those deep dives coming, and so we'll take what the private sector economists say as well. It's an average of all of those different scenarios. So, look, the fact that we've said, and Minister Freeland and I have said very clearly, as is the Prime Minister, 23 is a turbulent year. There's lots of uncertainty. So we're going to be watching this every step of the way as we get ready for Budget 23. We still have fiscal room to be able to do the things we need to do, but the fiscal room has tightened over the economic, over the war in Ukraine, and the fact that we have made a very clear commitment to Ukraine, but also to Canadians as we get through inflation.
Too optimistic. Basically, that's what they're saying. It's too optimistic, and right now things have changed so that you are looking at a recession in 2023. Is that your assessment?
I think that if you take a look at the downside case that we had in the fall economic statement and the upside case, the reality is still somewhere in between. And that's why we wanted to make sure that those brackets were there. And look, we're going to watch things very carefully and be very clear with Canadians in Budget 23.
Merci. La question de la capacité fiscale qui s'est réduite.
Oui, absolument. Ce qu'on a fait dans l'énoncé fiscal, c'est qu'on avait une version pessimiste et une version optimiste de l'économie. À mon égard, l'économie est toujours entre ces deux éléments-là. Pour nous, ce qui est très important, c'est que chaque trimestre, on demande à toutes les économies du secteur privé de nous donner leur prédiction pour l'économie. On est en train de faire une autre de ces analyses. Et pour moi, c'est très clair, et pour le ministre Freeland, c'est très clair que le budget va être très clair avec les Canadiens en ce qui concerne notre capacité fiscale, mais aussi avec notre capacité de répondre aux besoins des Canadiens.
C'est réduite, cette capacité fiscale, c'est ce que vous avez dit.
On ne sait pas encore, mais on est très clair qu'avec avec toutes les grandes questions, la guerre en Europe, avec les taux d'intérêt, avec l'inflation, qu'il y avait un certain facteur X dans l'économie, et c'est pourquoi on est réunis aujourd'hui et demain ici à Hamilton. Merci tout le monde. David?
Minister, you've got to do a health deal with the provinces. You've got to have a competitive response in this budget to the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States. Yep. You've got all of this turbulence, the accusations you're underestimating things, and you still want to bend the fiscal path back towards the pre-pandemic sort of level. So how do you manage all of that? Given the uncertainty and the commitments that you've already made publicly to respond to these other challenges?
That's the job, David. It's our job to balance all those things and to make sure that we're clear with Canadians that there's fiscal capacity. And if that fiscal capacity is being constrained, as we may see from private sector economists, then it's up to us to make sure that the big ticket items that you mentioned, that we do in a responsible way.
De marge de manœuvre fiscalement parlant?
Regarde, on est en train de regarder les données de tous les économistes du secteur privé pour vraiment répondre à cette question. Et si on a moins de marge de manœuvre, on va être capable de faire moins, mais en même temps, on est capable d'utiliser la capacité fiscale qu'on a pour répondre aux besoins des Canadiens. Merci tout le monde.
Good afternoon. I'd like to take some time today to give an update on the passport situation. Then I would be happy to take your questions. First, I think it is important to recognize that for decades, the process of applying for and receiving a passport in Canada was one of the most seamless and predictable government services there was. The Government of Canada set a very high standard in getting citizens this critical document in a simple and timely way. Comme nous le savons, il y a eu d'énormes ratés dans le respect de cette norme élevée au cours de l'année 2022. Il y a environ 10 mois, nous avons commencé à constater une hausse sans précédent de la demande de passeport, à laquelle nous n'avons pas pu répondre, ce qui a entraîné d'énormes problèmes pour beaucoup trop de Canadiens. Il y a eu des files d'attente et des retards, ce qui a créé du stress et de l'incertitude. Je l'ai dit à plusieurs reprises et je le répète aujourd'hui. C'était inacceptable. Nous avons donc entrepris de corriger la situation. Service Canada a travaillé très fort pour relever des défis de taille et remettre le programme de passeport sur de solides rails de façon à répondre aux attentes légitimes des Canadiens. Service Canada nearly doubled the operational workforce from 1,365 employees in March to 2,639 in December. It expanded access to service for Canadians to more offices. It added processing capacity and streamlined operations. Staff worked thousands of hours of overtime, processing applications, printing passports, and helping Canadians directly on evenings, weekends, and on holidays. Special attention was paid to make sure Canadians with an urgent need were served in time for their travel. And these efforts paid dividends, re-stabilizing the program by the fall. As of October 3rd, Service Canada began to once again deliver within the service standards for well beyond 90% of new applications. However, there were still thousands of Canadians who applied well before that time who were forced to wait. Some of those Canadians may even just be receiving their passports now, despite having applied as early as the summer. I have seen these cases in my own office, as have my colleagues and MPs from all parties. To those Canadians and others who have shown such admirable patience during this difficult situation, I once again apologize. Since its peak in June 2022, after dedicating resources to ensure these Canadians receive their passports, approximately 98% of the backlog of applications have been processed. The backlog is virtually eliminated. The number of applications that remain are there for many possible reasons, and not every application results in a passport being issued. Some cases may have other complex issues to resolve, such as matters of child custody, eligibility, or integrity matters. Service Canada has assessed all of these complex files and is working diligently to complete the review and identify the appropriate outcome while ensuring passport integrity. The efforts and resources that have been deployed over the past year are now focused on maintaining service standards and anticipating growth in application volumes. The first wave of passports with 10-year validity were issued in July of 2013. Service Canada is now well positioned to handle the 2023 influx of renewals and beyond. Aucun programme ou service n'est à l'abri d'une crise, mais ce n'est pas une excuse pour ne pas être bien préparé. Les leçons apprises depuis le printemps ont été appliquées et si nous affrontons une nouvelle crise dans l'avenir, le programme de passeport aura fait tout son possible pour être prêt à y faire face. Je suis reconnaissante envers le personnel de Service Canada qui a consacré tant d'heures supplémentaires à servir des millions de Canadiens dans des circonstances difficiles. Et je rappelle une fois de plus aux Canadiens que Service Canada est là pour vous aider à obtenir votre passeport. Les bureaux de Service Canada sont ouverts au maximum de la capacité et respectent les normes de service avec constance. As was the case prior to the pandemic, there are going to be seasonal peaks, which might mean there are lineups at offices sometimes. With March break and summer quickly approaching, there is no time like the present to apply, so our Service Canada staff can serve you as quickly as possible and help get you on your way to your destination. I'd be happy to take your questions.
Madame Gould, donc les Canadiens, si je comprends bien, ne doivent pas craindre une répétition de ce qui s'est passé l'été dernier au cours des prochains mois?
Non, nous sommes retournés aux standards de service normal avant la pandémie. Nous sommes en train de livrer les passeports qui étaient appliqués par la Poste dans 20 jours et qui sont faits une application dans un bureau dédié aux passeports en 10 jours.
Mr. Gould, the situation with the passports, I think, has been one of the principal parts of the argument that Mr. Poilievre has used to make the point that Canada is broken. And I wonder how you feel that part of your file has become sort of the edge of the spear for one of the key political attacks against your government.
Well, look, what I would say is that when we were going through the pandemic, everything changed. Right? We knew that we were going to be opening up again. We knew that Canadians would want to travel. But that happened very quickly, and we saw a huge influx of demand. And what I would say is that I've had the opportunity to travel right across this country. I've been to dozens of Service Canada offices and spoken with dozens and hundreds of employees who work on the front lines. And what I have come to see for each and every one of them is their commitment to service and their desire to help Canadians. And so if there's something that I have seen across this country is that those frontline Service Canada officers have done everything they can to respond to Canadians in a difficult and challenging time and have worked so hard to make sure that Canadians can access their passport and go traveling. And what I would say is that in the past year, we have moved heaven and earth to make sure that this system is working for Canadians. And, I'm here to say today that it is, and Canadians can apply with confidence.
Do you have to convince Canadians, though, that Canada isn't broken?
I think Canadians see the country that we live in, and they see what's happening in other countries around the world. And while, we can always strive to do better, and there's always things that we need to work on as a country, that's part of living in a democracy, that's part of living in a society, they also see the challenges that many other countries around the world are facing. And while, we're going to keep working hard to make sure that we improve service delivery, we improve a whole range of issues in Canada, ultimately they know that there is something special about this country, that we have a lot to be proud of. We're going to keep working on it, but I think Canadians know that fundamentally.
Mia Rabson from the Canadian Press. I'm wondering how long these extra staffers will have to be there. Is this going to be a permanent thing, or when that's going to ramp down? And if you could give us an idea of what the extra costs have been to manage this over the last 6 months.
So, first of all, the passport program runs on a dedicated fund because it kind of pays for itself through the fees for passports. So it's not something that really draws on the fiscal framework. So we haven't had to ask for additional resources because we have the revolving fund for passports. These additional staff are there for the foreseeable future, because we have increased demand. So, for example, we're on track to deliver just over 3, maybe 3.5 million passports by the end of this fiscal year. That's well over double what we would have done in the previous year. And for the next couple of years, we're looking at between 3 and 5 million passport applications for the next couple of years. So we know that we need to have this increased capacity based on kind of those natural cycles of when passport applications are made. And as I mentioned in my remarks, this July is the first year of the 10-year renewal. So we know that there's going to be an increased demand. One of the things that I will say, though, is unlike what happened in the spring and summer of last year, we're anticipating more renewals. One of the big differences for last spring and summer is that we had about 80 to 85% of applications were for new passports, so first-time passport holders, which are more complex, whereas what we're anticipating, particularly for this summer, is a higher level of renewals, and those are much simpler to do.
Quelles leçons avez-vous appris, vous et le gouvernement, de ce qui s'est passé?
Oh, il y a beaucoup de leçons que nous avons appris de cette situation, mais moi, personnellement, il y a quelques-uns. Premièrement, que le gouvernement peut réagir et peut changer la manière de comment il livre des services. Ce que nous avons vu dans la situation particulièrement à Montréal, parce que c'était un des endroits les plus difficiles et où il y avait le plus de pression sur le système, c'est de changer la manière de comment nous répondre aux besoins du citoyen, du client. On a changé la manière de servir les clients. Ce n'était pas seulement de les laisser dans une ligne à attendre. On peut faire des rendez-vous, on peut faire donner des cartes avec un rendez-vous pour plus tard et généralement traiter les citoyens d'une mieux manière. Ça, c'est possible pour le gouvernement de faire et on a changé beaucoup comment on fait ces services en personne. Deuxièmement, on peut rendre des services où les gens habitent. Une des choses qui était difficile pendant cette crise, c'est que c'était plus efficace et plus rapide d'aller chercher un passeport en personne à un bureau de passeport que de l'envoyer par la poste. Mais on avait eu seulement à peu près 35 bureaux dans le pays où vous pouvez le faire. Alors, si vous êtes quelqu'un qui habite loin d'un centre de population, vous avez besoin de voyager là-bas pour le faire. Bon, on a ouvert 13 bureaux. Bon, les bureaux déjà existaient, mais on offre maintenant des services de passeport dans 13 bureaux de plus dans le pays pour justement aider les gens qui habitent à rural, dans un endroit plus retiré, qui ne doivent pas aller jusqu'à Montréal ou Edmonton ou Vancouver pour chercher leur passeport. Et ça a aidé dans deux manières. Premièrement, les gens, par exemple, du Yukon ne doivent pas voyager à Calgary ou Vancouver pour chercher leur passeport. Ils peuvent le chercher où ils habitent, à Whitehorse ou dans le territoire de Yukon. Mais aussi, ça aide les gens qui habitent à Vancouver parce qu'il n'y a pas de personnes qui viennent de dehors pour le chercher. Alors, dans ces 13 bureaux qui offrent ce service maintenant, ils ont livré plus de 55 000 passeports dès qu'on a commencé à ouvrir ces bureaux de septembre. Et on va l'offrir dans plusieurs services à venir. Alors, il y a beaucoup de choses qu'on peut faire mieux. La troisième chose qu'on a appris, c'est qu'on a besoin de moderniser comment nous livrons des services aux Canadiens. Je crois que pour beaucoup de Canadiens, ça serait très surprenant. C'était surprenant pour moi de voir comment le gouvernement du Canada a relié sur le papier et on n'a pas des services digitaux. Alors, nous sommes en train de voir comment on pourrait moderniser la livraison des services de passeport, justement pour faire le service plus moderne, mais ce que nous espérons dans le 20e siècle. Merci.
Taria Esri, Global News. What do you say to Canadians who are out money from delays you described as unacceptable because of canceled vacations? What recourse do they have, if any?
Well, so first of all, when it comes to passports, we always recommend Canadians apply well in advance. And I would still encourage people to make sure that if they have travel coming up, to check to make sure that they do have a valid passport. Of course, even in that situation, as much as we try to make sure that everybody gets their passport on time, and the majority of the time we are able to, sometimes there are extenuating circumstances. As I mentioned, not every application is going to result in a passport because there may be documents that are missing, there may be integrity issues, there may be security challenges. However, what I would say is that where we are today is that we are delivering between 95 and 98% of the time within those service standards. And so Canadians can have confidence that they should be able to get their passport on time so long as everything is correct with their application. Thank you.
OK, bonjour tout le monde. Bonjour, je suis très content que vous êtes ici. On a eu une très utile, très constructive, très productive premier jour de notre retraite du cabinet. Ce matin et pendant le déjeuner, l'enjeu principal était l'économie. Je sais, nous savons que l'économie, c'est l'enjeu principal pour les Canadiens et Canadiennes. Nous avons discuté l'abordabilité pour les familles canadiennes et qu'est-ce que le gouvernement peut faire pour, comme nous avons dit dans le budget, dans l'énoncé économique de l'automne, qu'est-ce que nous pouvons faire toujours pour aider la croissance économique du Canada pour créer plus d'emplois. So it has been a really good cabinet retreat, a really good discussion so far. The focus this morning and over lunch has been the economy. I think that is entirely appropriate. I think that is what Canadians are focused on as well. We have spoken a lot today about the challenges Canadian families are facing, and we have talked a lot about the work that we are doing as a government, that Canadians are doing, Canadian people, Canadian businesses, to increase Canada's economic capacity, to increase growth, and to drive the creation of more good jobs for Canadians. We spoke very much about the challenges ahead. There is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of volatility in the global economy. And we also spoke about the position of strength from which Canada enters this challenging period. Strongest economic growth in the G7 in 2022 so far, and a very strong jobs position, very strong December jobs numbers, and something that is really important to me, very record high labor force participation, and the highest participation in the labor force for women in prime working years. And I really emphasize that because for a Canadian, there are lots of things that affect your economic well-being. But I can't think of a single one that makes the biggest difference. That makes a bigger difference than whether you have a job or not. And when the COVID recession hit, our government's relentless focus was jobs, jobs, jobs. We knew that job loss was devastating for Canadians, and we have been working hard with Canadian people, with unions, with Canadian businesses to recover those lost jobs. We're now at more than 120% of the jobs lost to COVID, and that is really important for Canadians, for the people of Hamilton. Okay, je suis prête à répondre à vos questions.
Minister, I'm wondering, Randy Boissonnault this morning said if we have less fiscal room, we won't be able to do as much. Is that the approach you're taking to budgeting, that some spending items that your government has promised will be taken off the table depending on how the recession plays out this year?
I think that's the approach that governments should always take to putting together a budget. If there's less fiscal room, you can do less.
We haven't seen that from your government, though.
I disagree. I think that in the April budget and in the fall economic statement, we were very, very focused on taking a fiscally responsible approach. And if you look at Canada's economic performance, at Canada's fiscal picture in 2022 in the international context, we had last year the lowest deficit in the G7, the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. And we pursued that approach for two reasons. The first was we understood that inflation was elevated, and that at a time of elevated inflation, it was really important for us not to pour fuel on the flames of inflation, not to make the Bank of Canada's job harder. And the second reason is we understood then and we understood now there's a lot of uncertainty in the world economy, and we have wanted to keep our powder dry.
Minister Freeland, I wanted to ask you about that most of our NATO allies now seem to have made a comment about whether or not they want to send tanks to Ukraine. Why is Canada so reluctant to explain what we want to do on that front?
Well, let me just start by saying that Canada is absolutely committed to supporting Ukraine, and we're going to be with the people of Ukraine for as long as it takes. And as finance minister, let me also add that I really believe that a clear, strategically viable and stable Ukrainian victory this year would be a big boost for the global economy and a big boost for Canada. And I say that because I think it's important for us as Canadians to understand we're supporting Ukraine because it's the right thing to do, because the brave and really smart resistance of the people of Ukraine, I think, has earned the admiration of the whole world. But we are also supporting Ukraine because it is in our national interest to do so. I'd also like to remind people that on the financial front, Canada is, on a per capita basis, one of the leading supporters of Ukraine. And that economic battlefield is a very important one. Helping the Ukrainian government to be viable every day, to pay pensions to Ukrainians, to literally keep the lights on is important, and we're there. Canada is also a very important military partner for Ukraine. My colleague, Anita Anand, who is here and with whom I've spoken about this today and yesterday, and with the Prime Minister, has said that everything is on the table when it comes to supporting Ukraine. Minister Anand recently announced 200 Rochelles going to Ukraine, and we are going to continue supporting Ukraine because that's the right thing to do.
À propos des risques, vous parlez des challenges ahead, des risques devant le Canada. Quels sont-ils? Est-ce qu'on parle d'une récession? Et j'aimerais ça vous entendre aussi en réaction à ce rapport là, qui a été publié sur le fait que vous avez sous-estimé, selon ce rapport, les risques de taux d'intérêt élevés, que ça vous enlèverait de la capacité pour financer des programmes canadiens.
OK, deux questions. Alors, en ce qui concerne les risques, je vais parler du trois. Premièrement, c'est l'économie mondiale. Et vraiment, il y a beaucoup d'incertitudes autour de l'économie mondiale. Si on parle, par exemple, de la Chine aujourd'hui réouvre sa économie, comme nous avons fait, comme le G7 a fait l'année passée. On a vu qu'avec l'ouverture d'économie, après les lockdowns de COVID, il y a beaucoup de phénomènes difficiles à prévoir. Et c'est le processus qu'on a dans la Chine aujourd'hui. Alors, c'est un élément d'incertitude. Deuxièmement, aujourd'hui, nous sommes dans le troisième acte dans la récession du COVID, l'acte final. Et on a vu des actions des banques centrales très vite. Et c'est la première fois dans une génération qu'on a eu un phénomène comme ça. Et pour cette raison, c'est difficile à savoir précisément quel sera l'effet précis à l'économie canadienne. Et pour cette raison, pour raison de l'incertitude qui existe dans l'économie mondiale, je pense qu'aujourd'hui, c'est très important, plus important que jamais pour notre gouvernement d'avoir une approche responsable du côté fiscal. Votre deuxième question, je ne suis pas d'accord. Et si vous regardez l'énoncé économique de l'automne, on a mis dans l'énoncé économique de l'automne un scénario alternatif. Parce que même en automne, c'était évident pour nous qu'on a eu beaucoup d'incertitudes dans l'économie canadienne et l'économie mondiale. Et pour cette raison, on a inclus dans nos projections un scénario alternatif. Et comme vous savez très bien, mais il va la peine d'expliquer pour les gens qui ne sont pas les journalistes, les économistes, le scénario de base dans notre énoncé économique de l'automne, ce n'était pas la création des fonctionnaires dans le ministère des Finances. Ce n'est pas la création des politiciens dans le ministère des Finances. Le scénario de base, c'est un scénario créé par la moyenne des prévisions des économistes dans le secteur privé. C'est objectif. Alors, on a pris ça comme le scénario de base, comme le Canada a fait maintenant pour 30 ans. Et c'est une pratique que je pense est importante pour l'indépendance, l'objectivité de nos projections. Mais c'était évident qu'on a eu un risque d'une économie moins forte. Et pour cette raison, on a publié un scénario alternatif. Et je pense que c'est important pour tout le monde de lire ce scénario, de voir qu'on était ouverte avec les Canadiens, que c'était une possibilité. Et on est prêt pour ça aussi.
Minister, last year you talked a lot about how you needed to keep your powder dry, and you were keeping your powder dry. But all we're hearing right now is all the spending pressures heading into this year's budget on healthcare, on industrial subsidies, and potentially staving off an economic downturn this year. So is this era of keeping your powder dry over, and what does that mean for the fiscal track you laid out just in last year's budget?
That is an excellent question. And let me offer you three perspectives. I do think, as I've said in response to earlier questions, that there is still a lot of uncertainty in the world economy. And that means that we do need to continue to take a fiscally prudent approach. We still do not know for sure how the plane is going to land. We do not know for sure how the COVID recession is going to finally play out. And we do have the reopening of China as a new international, I won't call it a wild card, but a source of real uncertainty. Could be upside, could be downside, maybe a little bit of both. So I think taking a fiscally responsible approach, it continues to be important, and I am glad that that is the approach we took in April and in the fall. And I do want to remind people, lowest deficit in the G7 last year, that is significant. Lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7 last year, that is significant. Now, you've mentioned at the same time some real fiscal pressures. Health, the need to invest in the green transition, chief among them. And I would agree with you. Those are significant fiscal pressures, and those are also issues that Canadians are looking to us to respond to. When it comes to healthcare, I hear from people every day about the importance of maintaining something which I think all Canadians are anxious about and all Canadians are really proud of. And that is our universal healthcare system. And I think Canadians rightly expect provincial governments and federal governments to work together to make sure that healthcare system works. On the green transition, this is a once-in-a-generation moment. And either Canada seizes that opportunity, seizes our share of the new industrial global economy which is being built, or we get left behind. Now, when I frame the question that way, and I think that is the only way to frame the question, I think it has to be obvious to all of us that we must seize that opportunity. So some challenging things to all do at the same time, and that's the balance we're going to have to find in the budget.
Minister, on healthcare, can you just explain a little bit your thinking on what the fact that many provinces are many of the largest provinces are either at or close to budget surpluses, how that factors into your thinking about what you need to do in terms of federal contributions on a long-term basis, and whether you think actually, given all the uncertainty you've talked about in your own, that affects your own fiscal track, does it make sense to do a 10-year deal, a 7-year deal, a 5-year deal? Like, can you share us a little bit of your thinking on that?
Okay, well, first of all, let me thank you for the question. And that is a very important point. Healthcare, of course, is a provincial responsibility, and we respect provincial jurisdiction in healthcare. And we also understand, as I think do Canadians, that with authority comes responsibility. The fiscal position of many Canadian provinces is very strong today. And I think Canadians, quite naturally and appropriately, expect provinces to use that fiscal capacity to support the healthcare systems that all of us depend on. Now, we committed in our campaign platform to doing our share to ensure Canada's healthcare system is strong. We will be faithful to those commitments. It's a promise we made to Canadians. And I think it's entirely appropriate for the federal government to play its role in ensuring that our healthcare system is strong, is stable, and has the capacity to deal with some of the new challenges of the 21st century. Okay. Merci beaucoup.
The time frame?
Bonjour tout le monde. Hi everybody. It's great to see you. I hope you're doing fine. Let me first talk about Cameroon. So first and foremost, we were asked by the Cameroon government to hold peace talks. UN representatives were present, and our goal is to make sure that we can work proactively, positively. This is a conflict that has been going on for 40 years. Thousands of people have been affected. And so peace talks are complicated and messy, but we stand ready to help.
Sort d'où cette nouvelle-là?
Mais comme je vous l'ai dit, les processus de paix sont toujours compliqués, sont toujours longs aussi. Alors, notre objectif est de faire en sorte de jouer un rôle positif et d'appeler les parties à la table de négociation. Je pense qu'il y a plusieurs civils qui ont souffert de la crise qui dure depuis 40 ans. Alors, notre objectif est de faire en sorte, notre seul intérêt est de faire en sorte que les parties peuvent s'entendre. Il y a déjà un processus de paix par le passé qui avait été mené par la Suisse qui, malheureusement, n'a pas fonctionné. Alors, comme je le disais, notre objectif, c'est de faire en sorte qu'on puisse jouer un rôle positif.
Le processus de paix, ce genre de déclaration-là de la part du Cameroun, est-ce que ça peut le faire dérailler ou, selon vous, quels sont vos...
Je pense qu'on doit être patient et prendre une grande respiration, un grand respire, comme on dit en québécois.
L'Allemagne est d'accord pour envoyer des chars d'assaut Léopard 2 en Ukraine. C'est un gros changement quand même. Est-ce que ça vous convainc? Est-ce que le Canada va faire la même chose finalement? Est-ce que ça change la donne pour vous?
Hier, vous m'avez posé une question qui était similaire. Alors, ce que je peux vous dire, c'est qu'on va coordonner avec nos alliés.
Why is the Cameroon government now saying that they didn't ask her, that Canada's not involved in the peace process?
Well, like I answered Joël Denis, peace processes are always messy and take time. And this is a conflict that has been going for 40 years. There was a previous peace process that was mediated by Switzerland that unfortunately didn't work. And so our goal is to be patient and to take a deep breath.
Canada is still there and planning to participate if...
Our sole interest in this is to make sure that parties are at the table.
Vous dites que vous allez coordonner avec vos alliés, Mme Joly, au sujet de l'Ukraine. Juste compléter là-dessus. Quand vous dites que vous allez coordonner, donc vous êtes favorable. Le Canada, est-ce qu'on peut dire que vous êtes favorable à l'envoi de tanks Léopard 2?
Mon cher Raymond, je t'ai donné ma réponse. Alors, nous allons coordonner avec les alliés.
To become involved in the peace talks.
We were approached by the Cameroon government, and we also had a UN representative present during the mediation. But that's what we do, and we will do it well.
Minister, a question about some applications for exemptions to Russian sanctions. People in Canada who say they don't support the Putin regime, who've been caught up in these sanctions, there's a backlog of them seeking exemptions because of no political support for the Putin regime. So what is your department doing for that, and what's the legal basis for sanctioning people with no demonstrated link to supporting Vladimir Putin?
Well, David, you've heard me many times saying that our goal is to really target Putin and his enablers. that has been our strategy for Canada, for all our allies as well. Now, when it comes to individual cases, we'll work on a case-by-case basis, and we want to make sure that the essence of our approach is respected, and we want to make sure that we have a human approach.
But there's a backlog that's built up for quite a bit of time now. So are you taking steps to accelerate that and move through it faster? I mean, what's your department doing there?
We will make sure that the department does this work.
Minister, is there any update on the Canadians in Syria? Will the federal government appeal the court ruling, or will it accept it? What are the next steps?
So you've heard me in the past talking about the deteriorating conditions in the northeast Syria camps. And you heard me also saying that I was very preoccupied about the state of women and children. So indeed, we've had have a settlement now regarding the fact that women and children will be coming back in Canada, and we will make sure, based on also the fact that we want to respect the security of Canadians at all times. When it comes to men, we received the more than 60 pages judgment from the federal court, and we are analyzing it.
Is there any deadline or timeline for you?
I'll be talking also with my colleague Marco Mendicino on this issue. Thank you.